I want to begin with a little piece this morning, which is the first page after the first yellow sheet. And Jan is going to join me because she sent me this, 6-8 months ago, something like that? I thought, oh, that's nice. It's prior cause. What's the cause? And then cause of the cause and back. And I kind of set it aside. And then later on, it kept coming to me. And I think, there's more to that than meets the eye. And so I kind of went back to it. And I'm going to take off. But first, I'd like you to just present it or field any questions or whatever.
I have a client who is an executive that I have worked with for quite a few years. He's had an ongoing situation with his mother. And it is that he's really angry at her for a lot of things. He's in his 50s, and so this has been going on. I tried a lot of things. Re-anchoring, change history, blah, blah, blah. His mother had called, she was in her 80s, poor thing, and she'd call and complain, and he would always get upset about it. So I thought, okay, let's throw this in. And I said, you get upset because, and the pattern is in your book. And at some point, it was because of her childhood, etc. And I noticed him going into observer position with it. You can with your hands, so I would just go because, and at some point we started to get to her, and she did that because. So the movement towards someone else to observer position in the because worked for him. And at some point you could see it just snapped, that this woman was not trying to intimidate him or annoy him. She was doing it because of her history. And it expanded the whole scope of it and worked instantly. As it says in the flyer, Steve, after he'd played with it for a while, called and said, have you done follow-up? And the fellow just happened to be coming in that week, so I followed up. And the results are there. It's simply not a trigger for him anymore.
Thanks. Thanks a lot, Jan. Okay. Now, there are many, many little pieces here. I love to take something like this, a small piece where there's not all the confusion of all the many, many sentences that were said. And that's how science usually starts out. When the chemists first started studying molecules and atoms and stuff, they didn't start with biochemistry, where things are very, very messy. They started with very simple things like salts and gases and things like that. And so that's my approach. Doesn't mean it's the best approach, but it's my approach. So I love to take a little piece like this and find out what are all the little things that make it go. Now, the first thing is quite obvious. It's prior cause, right? If you're familiar with the sleight of mouth patterns, I don't like that title, but that's how it's often known. That if you go for the cause of something, it changes the person's internal experience. If I'm here in a problem situation, apparently Jan's client stepped out of that and then saw the woman over here, his mother over here, and then her prior cause and her prior cause and her prior cause and so on like that. Now, you don't have to do it that way, and I think it might be equally useful, or at least pretty close, if you stayed in the situation and you saw the person, so you remained associated, and then you could see that person's past behind them and behind them and behind them, or maybe to the left or something like that. So you wouldn't have to become dissociated. But there's a strong tendency, I think, to become dissociated. Now, here's the thing that, here's what I notice about prior cause. When you get prior cause, you have, well, you start with a problem image or representation, including, I'm going to use images because they're easier to gesture about, but also hearing and so on. You get prior cause, you get problem, and then you get prior cause. It expands the scope of what you're paying attention to. It adds stuff into your images, and whether it's a separate image over here or a larger image or something, but it gives you more information. At a certain point, when you have more information, often your response will change. Jen started out by saying, so what is, the problem is because, and then she shifts to past tense. She goes to was. That again pulls for dissociation and distance and less emotional and feeling and stuff. So just switching the verb tense is another piece in here. Now, the sentence completion thing is very nice. If Jan had said something like, oh, your mother's probably that way because of her upbringing, then that person has to then take it in and consider whether it's true or not and go through a whole decision process. But if you say, and that is because of, or something like that, and I think Jan, did you use a gesture like this? Is that right, Jan?
Yeah.
So it's like...
With sentence completion, I explain ahead of time that I'm going to give them the beginning, they're going to give it an ending, that's all.
Okay.
And that when I do this, they're to do the same beginning, new ending.
Okay, great. So then you go, and that's because, like that, and that's a nice nonverbal signal for, and that's another piece. You can do so much, only so much with your hands in your pockets, or you're sitting on your hands like this. If you do even a little bit of gestures to mark out the kind of things that you're talking about, it makes it much easier for people to sort things out in their own brain. So the sentence stem, by using a sentence stem, the answer comes out of the person. Then there's no decision process. Oh, do I agree with that or not? It comes right out of the person. And even if you say, now I want you to think of the most bizarre cause you could possibly think of, still it comes out of them. And even though it's labeled bizarre, they don't have to go through a decision process about whether someone else is right or not. It comes out of themselves. Now, what this got me thinking of is I like to generalize. And I like to generalize in little bits rather than some people generalize in great huge chunks like this. But I got to thinking, what if you used the other sleight of mouth patterns in a recursive way? Because here's one. You're just using one thing, ridiculously simple, dates back 100 years to Freud. Tell me more about your past and your mother and all this stuff. That's essentially going back to prior cause. It's doing it a little messily, but it's doing it. What if you did it with other things? How about simply expand frame is another one. I've got it down here. You don't have to write it down. It's in the notes. Expand the frame. So here's your mother. What if you just expand the frame? Rather than expanding it in time, what came before, you simply go right now. See your mother. See her larger context. Where is she? She's in your house. Okay. What's the larger context around that? Again, when you add more and more information like this in a larger context, and you ask the same question recursively, you get more and more information in the picture. For one thing, the larger the picture is, the smaller the problem is. You all know this, right? Okay, well, that's pretty useful, especially if somebody's sobbing, their heart away in your office. It's real helpful just as a starter to give them a little bit of, quote, perspective. You can shrink the frame, too. I remember Richard Bandler talking once about somebody who was in a very tense situation. Someone was yelling and screaming at them and stuff. And he zeroed in on the person's mouth. And suddenly these lips were about 6 feet wide. And these great blubbery lips, sort of like two whales, were kind of banging against each other. And somehow he had a different response to that. Connery's core transformation process is basically going for the outcome of the outcome of the outcome of the outcome. Now, outcome is a little bit slippery because outcome can be either scope or category. Someone can say, I want a particular sports car, which is an actual piece of sensory-based experience, or they can say, I want status. Status is a category of stuff. And when you go meta-outcome, you don't really know what you're going to get until you ask, you find out. Someone may go from a category outcome to a very specific outcome, or they could go to a larger category, or they could go from a category to a specific thing. So this is essentially what I'm doing here is giving you a new slice on scope and category, which for me has been tremendously useful in organizing what I do and understanding the kind of things that people experience.